While visiting in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, I was asked to do an interview on Cornerstone Television. Dick Hatch is the host. This is a multi-part series. This is the fourth part of that series. If you would like to watch the first three segments, look at the archive site on American Vision's website.
Once again, Ron Hembry will appear. The great one will be back, and I just happen to be sitting here because he's out of town. But we've got Gary DeMar, American Vision, author, lots of things like these DVDs so that you can learn about the country. And, okay, here I go.
Okay.
I'm going to step in it now. We don't teach people that, well, let me go back just for a second and get your... So Paul is taken into prison, and they're going to beat him,
right.
Okay? And then he looks at him and goes, is it right to beat a Roman citizen? Now, he's taking his citizenship and putting it up as a shield. And they freak out, and they want him to go out the back door. And he says, I'm not going out the back door, I'm going out the front door, okay? We also have this, this lesson about talents. And, you know, the other two guys with the 5 talents and 3 talents, they brought a return. It doesn't say how much, but they brought a return back, and that was fine. The only guy who didn't bring a return back was the guy who buried it. And I quite frankly look at this and think to myself, what is God going to say to me when he says, I gave you an American citizenship. I gave you the greatest nation in the world. I gave you the one that you could change by just getting involved. What do you mean you're not going to get involved in politics? I'm going to take everything you got and give it to the other guy because at least he went out and got called a toad.
Well, I mean, yeah, the story about Paul getting beaten by this guy, and this Roman soldier says, I had to buy my Roman citizenship.
Right.
I want you to think about that a second. He was willing to put money down to be a Roman citizen so he could enjoy all of the privileges and all of the freedoms of a Roman citizenship. We have all that today, and we didn't have to buy any of it.
Right.
The Apostle Paul, would you beat a Roman citizen? And he's afforded all of the liberties about a Roman citizenship. And who does he appeal to? Finally gets to Acts chapter 25. To whom does he appeal? He doesn't quote Philippians 3:20, do anything you want to me because my citizenship is in heaven. He says, I appeal to Caesar.
Right.
And he gets a free boat ride to Rome where he gets to preach the gospel. And eventually, through all of this, I mean, again, our history is often vague. Through all this, the Roman Empire falls apart. The government collapses from the center. And Christianity transforms the world. That's why we're here today. It's why we're on this TV station today. Christians came here, took the emphasis of the gospel and what it was, transformed lives. You change a society from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Right.
And it comes from individuals in terms of self-government. You mentioned character. I use the phrase, self-government. They're self-governing individuals under God. They take the Bible as it applies to themselves, and they work out their salvation with fear and trembling in themselves. And then they transfer that into their families. And so what they are as self-governors, they create a family government. Then the church is a government as well. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. It's interesting, you read the qualifications in 1 Corinthians chapter 3 for an elder. They're the same qualifications for a civil ruler in Exodus chapter 18.
Well, see, it's been my contention, and I'm glad we're getting into this now because I love this part of it. If I'm correct, when they put this government together, they were thinking of the church with the deacons and the elders, and someone was in charge of spiritual, but somebody had to make sure that the chairs were put out for the, MOPS girls to come in and have their meetings. So they saw the government as the deacons of the church who took care of the temporal side of the world. Am I wrong?
Well, yeah, not only that, but the decentralized nature of our government, the decentralization of the courts, the decentralization of powers, the checks and balances. Again, back to Exodus chapter 18. Moses was a centralized power. Everybody was coming to him for all their problems. And Jethro comes along and says, man, you got this all wrong. You need to teach teach the people. You're talking about character. You got to find people of good character, understand the law of God, and then you need to teach the law of God to the people. Then you need to decentralize power and put men over thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens, and work this hierarchy of power up. And then, if the very most difficult cases, Moses, you handle. That's our system of government. And whether they were self-conscious about this in terms of the Bible, certainly there were enough Christians in that day who understood these principles, and they were inherent. It's not something they had to think about. It was just the way they understood the way political power runs. They didn't trust human nature. They knew that you had. Jefferson talked about you had to bind down rulers by the chains of the Constitution. You had to create a contract, a written contract that they took an oath to uphold. Because even though you get the best people with the greatest character, they still understood man how to follow nature.
Now, this is very interesting. You've touched on two things that are really fire me up, and one is that Ronald Reagan said, and it was a stroke of brilliance. Government is not the answer. Government's the problem. They saw the government as being a problem because they were coming out of England. They were coming out of kings that could do whatever they wanted, and all those kinds of misuse and abuse of power. And they recognized, this wonderful band of Christians understood that they had to chain these guys down because it was a necessary evil. You had to have some kind of government.
Right.
You had to have somebody who was going to go get the bad guys and put them in jail. But if you didn't chain these guys to something, they were going to end up as kings and queens, right?
Yeah, and George Washington was the consummate character of that time. Here's a man serves 2 terms as president, and he's called the Cincinnatus because this was a farmer in Rome who had done the similar thing. He had left his farm, he had ruled, but when his job was done, he went back to the farm. And that's exactly what Washington did. He says, look, I haven't come here to be a king. I've come here to...
Even though some people wanted to make him king.
Exactly, they did. Very much like 1 Samuel chapter 8.
Yeah.
We want a king like all the other nations.
Right.
And even after Samuel told them how bad this king was going to be, listen, think of this extraordinary thing. He wanted to tax them 10%. That was considered tyranny. You got what's the sales tax here in Pennsylvania?
I don't know.
6 or 7%.
6 or 7%. The other thing in this, I told you before, I've got only 1 minute in this segment, but I'm going to step in it again. I say that these problems that we're having in this government with this constitutional and governmental firestorm, Tea Party, 9/12, all these folks, this whole thing is caused because the church didn't teach the basic character of the Christian life, like self-denial, like self-government. Who was it that said that this government would be like a net to a whale if people didn't have self-control?
I'm not familiar.
I'm forgotten. He said it wouldn't restrain people any more than a fishing net would. This Constitution and this government that we were given can just turn a firestorm, can't it? If we don't have the character to understand we're responsible. We've got to be self-reliant. I was saying backstage, my belief is that I have to earn 110, which I'm not doing right now, 110% of my expenses. I can't give anything away unless I have it, and if I owe it to the gas company, I got to pay my bills and then give. I just can't. Okay, anyway, we'll talk about that in a minute, and I'll try and settle myself down right after this. We'll be right back. Stick around with Gary DeMar.
For more related to today's topic, check out America's Christian History, The Untold Story. You will find it at AmericanVision.com.